Well, here in Jeremiah 16, we're continuing this conversation that Jeremiah and God are having with each other. Basically, that started in chapter 14 and went through 15, now into chapter 16. So this is God now responding back to Jeremiah. I remember in 15, he was complaining about how bad his life was. So we're going to get a bit of a response from God on this now in the beginning of chapter 16. So the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, verse 2, Thou shalt not take thee a wife, neither shalt thou have sons or daughters in this place. For thus saith the Lord concerning the sons and concerning the daughters that are born in this place, and concerning their mothers that bear them, and concerning their fathers that begat them in this land, they shall die of grievous deaths. They shall not be lamented, neither shall they be buried, but they shall be as dung upon the face of the earth, and they shall be consumed by the sword and by famine, and their carcasses shall be meat for the fowls of heaven and for the beasts of the earth. So I'm going to pause right there for a second. This is, God's like, look, don't take a wife. You're not going to want to have kids because it's just going to make life worse, because they're all going to be destroyed in this destruction that's coming in. So we're going to kind of spare you that. But then this means he's not getting married, so he's going against the cultural standards of the time of being older and single, basically. Now, a couple of things to point out in this is this whole section we're getting into is an autobiographical style. So Thompson, in his Book of Jeremiah, is mentioning this this concept here. So Jeremiah was forbidden to marry and to participate in the normal joys and sorrows of his people. These deprivations made his life a picture of the terrible fate that awaited the nation. So again, his life is somewhat being metaphorical for what's happening with the nation, what's going to be going on with them. In fact, in more in Thompson's book, he said this. He says, the prophetic word came not only by direct preaching and symbolic action, but at times through events in the life of a prophet or his family. So this is metaphorical. Sometimes God will use the prophet's life as a metaphor for teaching the people, basically. Hosea's unhappy marriage is one. Remember that he married a prostitute who cheated on him all the time. Isaiah's family, he married and had kids and named his kids some pretty unfortunate names, but the symbol of what they meant was important, basically. The death of Ezekiel's wife, Jeremiah's call to remain unmarried, are all examples of the proclamation of the word through family events. But the call here to a life of celibacy is unique in the Old Testament. In the ancient Near East, and therefore in Israel, a large family betokened divine blessings. So this is this concept of like the gospel of prosperity, that the more children you have, the bigger your family, the more blessed you must be, especially if they're sons. Sterility and barrenness, on the other hand, were regarded as a curse, and virginity was regarded as a cause for mourning. An old Sumerian proverb curses celibacy. Hence, it was altogether unusual for a young man in Israel like Jeremiah to remain unmarried, and the point Jeremiah makes of his celibacy seems to suggest that it was not his choice to remain unmarried. He could do so only because of a strong conviction that the single state might convey one aspect of his message to his people in powerful terms. That he abstained from marriage and children was a powerful sign that the end of Judah was at hand. People would die in the land before many days were past. Jeremiah, who never had a wife or children, was as those who would be, who had married and had produced children, but would lose them all in the calamity that would befall Judah. So that's exactly what we had just read is, God's going, one, I want this to be a symbol. You need to stand out from everybody else. You need to be different from everybody else. And here's what's going to happen. But also, we're going to save you some grief in the future, because having a wife and kids is just going to mean more sorrow because of how bad the destruction is going to be. So you don't have to get married. We don't want you to get married. Kind of not do that, basically. But can you imagine how bad this is? How bad that the destruction is? It's it'd be one thing to say have kids because maybe they'll grow up and then it might be their kids that will see the destruction. But to say nope, don't have kids because they're not going to survive. This is a bad destruction. Bad destruction. So even like it says in verse 4, the sword and the famine are going to wipe these people out. Now they're going to have a famine, a siege-induced famine, right before the battle starts. This is part of siege warfare. You surround your enemy, you cut off their supplies, and they starve to death, and then you run in and wipe them all out, basically. That's what's going to be happening. Now let's continue on with this in verse 5. For thus saith the Lord, enter not into the house of mourning, neither go to lament nor bemoan them. For I have taken away my peace from this people, saith the Lord, even loving kindness and mercies. Both the great and the small shall die in this land. They shall not be buried, neither shall men lament for them, nor cut themselves, nor make themselves bald for them. So again, when people die, it's custom to mourn, to have a funeral like we would do today. And what God's telling him is, don't go to the funerals, Jeremiah. Don't lament the loss of anybody, because no one's going to be around to lament their loss, the loss of them, when the destruction happens, basically. So Thompson made this comment. He said, the main thrust of this verse seems to be that in the shadow of impending national disaster, mourning for the loss of a loved one was out of place. The word mourning probably refers to a mourning feast, as in Aramaic. A lamenting and condoling was inappropriate. Yahweh had gathered up, that is, withdrawn his peace. The term peace is rich in meaning and describes in its widest sense the totality of well-being. But that had been withdrawn, as had his steadfast love and his compassion. The trio of terms, Salam, Hesed, and Rachamim, peace, steadfast love, and compassion, provides a profound picture of Yahweh's deep commitment to his people. But now, says Jeremiah, these have been withdrawn. So, no peace, no steadfast love, no compassion. God's not doing those things for Judah, basically. It is the ultimate calamity, the curse, which results from a breach of covenant. Ezekiel saw a comparable meaning in the death of his wife. This is bad for Judah. I hope you realize, this is the message that Jeremiah's trying to get across of, guys, this is bad. This is really bad. This is going to be a bad situation. And they're going, no, Jeremiah's a liar. These other prophets are telling us that we have peace and prosperity. This is just a short famine. It'll be okay. It's all going to get better. No enemies are going to come on because we are the chosen of God. Don't listen to Jeremiah. That's what's happening, basically. Now, in verse 7, continuing with this thought of the people, nobody's going to be there to mourn them. It's going to be so bad. So he's going to say in verse 7, neither shall men tear themselves for them in mourning, to comfort them for the dead, neither shall men give them the cup of consolation to drink for their father or for their mother. So there's no one that's going to be around to mourn them, basically. Now, verse 8, thou shalt not also go into the house of feasting to sit with them to eat and to drink. So this was, again, customary that you would go, when they'd have a funeral, there would be some mourning and loss, but then there would be a party of celebration afterwards. So you can kind of think maybe a New Orleans style funeral, if you will, on this. And God's telling Jeremiah, don't go to the party. You're not to be involved in these festivities at all, basically. Which kind of, again, ostracizes Jeremiah from the community, puts some distance between him and them. But it's hopefully it gets his message to stand out. Guys, this is nothing compared to what we're about to face. This isn't good, This isn't good for you. Now verse 9, for thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will cause to cease out of this place in your eyes, and in your days, the voice of mirth, and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom, and the voice of the bride. So think of Isaiah's idea of the bride and the bridegroom, the marriage covenant. No one's going to hear from them. No one's going to be speaking. They're not going to be on speaking terms. They've gone separate ways, basically. It's not going to be a good situation. And now verse 10, and it shall come to pass, when thou shalt show this people all these words, and they shall say unto thee, wherefore hath the Lord pronounced all this great evil against us? Or what is our iniquity? Or what is our sin that we have committed against the Lord our God? So this is the people going basically, why is Jeremiah acting so weird? Why is Jeremiah doing this? And when they talk about this, they're going to go, so what did we do wrong? to deserve that kind of a treatment coming up. So again, if you think about this from the standpoint of Jeremiah working with the people, Jeremiah's like, no, we shouldn't be mourning our loss, our dead, because the destruction is coming. There will be no one to mourn you when you die in this destruction. And they're going, but what have we done? We're just following custom. We're following the laws of the land, even though the laws of the land mean lying, cheating, and stealing is okay, committing adultery is okay. We're just doing what the government says. This is what's normal. This is our culturally acceptable thing. We're just doing what everybody else is doing. Why would this be a bad thing? Why would God punish us to do what everybody else is doing? So this is, again, perspective makes a big difference. Are we following, if it's one thing we learn from the Old Testament, are we following the prophet's perspective or a worldly perspective? Because there's a big difference, as we're finding in Jeremiah, between these two. All right, verse 11, then shalt thou say unto them, because your fathers have forsaken me, saith the Lord, and have walked after other gods, and have served them, and have worshipped them, and have forsaken me, and have not kept my law. So that's the beginning of this. When they say, what have we done that God would want to punish us this in what you say is coming, if it's going to be that bad? And he's going to say, well, it's because that you've been taught the culture has gone bad. Your fathers, your ancestors have started us on the wrong path, and you're still going on the wrong path, basically. We were going along with God, and then they went, and now we're down the road. We're way bad, and you need to come back, basically. And verse 12, then he's going to continue on and say, and ye have actually done worse than your fathers. For behold, ye walk every one after the imagination of his evil heart, that they may not hearken unto me. Therefore I will cast you out of this land into a land ye know not, neither ye nor your fathers, and there shall ye serve other gods day and night, where I will not show you favor. So when you think about this, okay, not only did your fathers do bad, but you are doing worse than your fathers have. And you're going after the vain imaginations of your own heart. This is the idea of my truth. I'm doing what I think is best for me, regardless of how it impacts and affects everybody else. Everyone is out for themselves. That's where lots of calamities and destruction come from, basically. And if you want a good example of that, just go watch the show, about John Nash. I just forgot the name of that show. It's a great movie about John Nash, the economist, that he came up with this new economic theory. The prevailing economic theory was everyone out for themselves, and he realized, no, if we align our goals, we all get our success. That's what we need to be focusing more on, to change the idea of economics. Amazing show. Sad that he had multiple personality disorders and other problems and challenges, but he was a genius of a guy. It was amazing. So if you think about this, what we've been learning, the people are getting worse. The wickedness is growing. It's getting worse and worse. They're not listening to God. They're doing what they want to do. They're following their own truth, that whole my truth idea. They're not following the truth, but what they think is best. And that's not, what we think is best isn't always really what's best. That's important, we have to think about. We can do, a lot of people say, oh, I can do whatever I want in my property. But realize that there's still cultural norms and there's other things that happen with your neighbor's property, that you've got to think about. And this is where lots of problems come in, when we stop thinking considerate about others and we focus only on our perspective. That person shouldn't have that flag out in front of their house because it's evil and bad. I'm going to destroy it because I don't want to look at that anymore. Even though it's on their property and they have every right legally to put it there, I am going to impose my truth on them and burn their flag. I mean, you can look at the news and see all this kind of stuff in the news today. This is the problem. Following my perspective as the ultimate perspective, imposing my belief on everybody else, is wrong. We need to learn to work together with each other's perspectives and come together better. That'll make things a lot better. Okay, but let's jump on here and move forward with verse 14. This is where we're at now. Therefore, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that it shall no more be said, the Lord liveth that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. So a day is going to come where they're not going to look at the miracle of the exile out of Egypt as a spiritual good point, basically. Verse 15, but the Lord liveth that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north and from all the lands whither he had driven them, and I will bring them again into their land that I gave unto their fathers. This is the mercy of God coming forward here. They're going to be destroyed. They can't avoid that, unfortunately, and nor would they avoid it, unfortunately, because the people don't think they've done wrong, because the false prophets are telling them they've done nothing wrong. So they're believing the people they want to believe. They're believing the people that allow them to be the way they want to be, rather than the way they should be. So in the last days, so this is from verse 14 on, we're getting more of latter-day prophecy here. Instead of focusing on, oh, it was such a great blessing God gave us when he brought us out of Egypt, they're not going to think about that. In the last days, when the gathering happens, so this is latter-day prophecy, they're going to be grateful and talking about the miracle of the gathering after the scattering. So Ray Huntington, in his article, The New Paradigm of Gathering, said this. He says, according to Jeremiah, the day will come when the Exodus story will be eclipsed by another event or series of events, the latter-day gathering of Israel. Stories from the modern gathering will replace the Exodus story as the benchmark demonstration of God's power and his control over the destiny of nations and individuals. Modern apostles and prophets will rehearse stories in general conference regarding their own missionary experiences, the experiences of other missionaries and converts, and the dedication of distant foreign lands for the preaching of the gospel. We're kind of doing that a little bit now, but that's coming more as well, basically. So they're going to look at the miracle of God bringing them out of the land back to their homelands, not look at the miracle of them coming out of Egypt. So there's another miracle of Exodus, of gathering, that's going to bring them out of the nations back to their homelands. That's going to be seen as a main point of this, showing, God showing his power and might and grace and mercy, basically. So verse 15, if I remember right, but the Lord liveth that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north. No, I read that one already. Verse 16. Behold, I will send many fishers, saith the Lord, and they shall fish them. And after will I send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them from every mountain and from every hill and out of the holes of the rocks. Verse 16 is a very powerful one. Okay, this is the gathering of Israel. Fishers, he's going to send many fishers. These are people who can convert many people together. They can get a lot of people. So verse 16 tells us this is missionary work. Verse 16 is a missionary scripture. Okay, if you're looking for a good missionary scripture, Jeremiah 16:16 is a good missionary scripture. There are missions that we could consider fishing missions. These are missions where it doesn't take much to get people to want to join the church. They go out, they just do their thing, they go talk to people as missionaries, they, street contact, they talk to members, they do the media referrals and things like that, and people are just coming at them. We could probably look at like South America as a common one, and some of those types of missions where, people would come home from their mission and be like, oh yeah, we baptized like 45 people on our mission. That was a very different mission than the one I served. I served in the southern U.S. area, and that was more of a hunter mission. Now, if you're a hunter, realize fishers in the Old Testament aren't like fly fishermen or bait casting. They're casting a net, and they're dragging hundreds of fish in at a time. Hunters are people that aren't going out looking for hundreds. They're going out, they're stalking their prey, they're tracking them, they're learning how to find their quarry. They're learning and understanding the animal that they're hunting, and they're going after it to get at least one. If you go like deer hunting, it's kind of an idea. we're going to stalk the animals. We're going to track them. We're going to find where they live, find where are they sleeping, where they bed down, where they go for food, where they get water, what is their roaming areas. Let's be ready, and then we can basically ambush them and get them. So that's the thing, is there's fishers, there's hunters. My mission, if you baptize 2 people in 2 years, that was awesome. Whereas like I had friends coming back from South America they're 30 and 40 baptisms in 2 years. This is missionary work. And the hunters are going to get them from every mountain, every hill, and out of the holes of the rocks. These are people that are specifically going out saying, I'm looking for a certain type of person, and we're going to find them. We're looking for people who want to follow God, and we will go hunt them down one-on-one and find them, basically. So this is powerful imagery. I mean, hunting and fishing imagery is very common for the culture in the time. But realize this is a gathering, and this is every mountain, every hill, out of the whole area. This isn't a local gathering. This is a global, worldwide gathering that is going to take place. This is missionary work, basically, is what they're talking about here. Very important. In fact, LeGrand Richer said this in General Conference once. He says, just contemplate that statement for a few moments, verses 14 and 15. Think how the Jews and the Christians all through these past centuries have praised the Lord for his great hand of deliverance under the hands of Moses when he led Israel out of captivity. And yet here comes Jeremiah with this word of the holy prophet telling us that in the latter days they shall no more remember that, but how God has scattered Israel from the lands whither he had driven them. And Jeremiah saw the day when the Lord would do this very thing, when he would call for many fishers and many hunters, and they shall hunt them from every mountain, every hill, and out of the holes of the rocks. Where do you find those fishers and hunters that we read about in this great prophecy of Jeremiah? They are these 14,000 missionaries of this church. Now, granted, this was 1971, so 14,000 missionaries is what they had back then. And those who have preceded them from the time that Prophet Joseph Smith received the truth and sent the messengers out to share it with the world. Thus have they gone out, fishing and hunting, and gathering them from the hills and the mountains and the holes in the rocks. I think that is more literal than some of us think. So that was April of 1971 conference report. You can look it up in the Ensign of June of 1971. You see that. Why it was in the June one, not the May one, I don't know. But that's where you can find that quote. So as we finish off here, it says verse 18, and first I will recompense their iniquity and their sin double. Because they have defiled my land, they have filled mine inheritance with the carcasses of their detestable and abominable things. So what that really means is, when you look at this, the noun misneh, usually translated double, that's what it says here, and their sin double, can possibly be understood as equivalent, since a similar word has been found in cuneiform documents at Alalak in Syria, carrying this sense. Then, if we see in the expression their iniquity and their sin as Henides, we may translate their sinful iniquity. Hence, we may translate the whole as, I will make them pay the equivalent of their sinful iniquity, and thus avoid the charge that God is unreasonable and unjust. So this isn't God saying, I'm going to double the punishment on them. This is God basically saying, it's kind of a mistranslation, is what happened for the English translation, is saying, I'm going to measure it out to the level of the level of punishment will equal the level of sin that they've done, basically. A similar understanding of Mishnah may be possible in Deuteronomy 15:18 and Isaiah 42. In each case, the judgment was equivalent to the offense. That was Thompson in his book of Jeremiah. The temple. So here's what's interesting. They defiled my land. They have filled mine inheritance with the carcasses of their detestable and abominable things. So the temple has been desecrated. The Sabbath day has been desecrated. There's altars. God's altars are being used for wrong things. Other altars are brought in. Covenants broken. Things used to worship God have been corrupted. So what tools were used to worship God are now being used to worship other gods. And that's bad. So the carcasses of their detestable, abominable things, idols. The wood, the stone idols are in the temple and in these areas. They've been desecrated, basically. So they're not worshiping the true God. They're worshiping these false gods, using all the tools that God told them to build so they can worship Him. Verse 19. This is Jeremiah. O Lord, my strength and my fortress and my refuge in the day of affliction. The Gentiles shall come unto thee from the ends of the earth, and shall say, surely our fathers have inherited lies, vanity and things wherein there is no profit. This is important to look at, okay? So what verse 19 is saying, basically, Gentiles will have a moment when they realize that their traditional religious views are false. This is talking about conversion, okay? When people start realizing, oh my gosh, the religion that I've been following is baloney. It's not true. This is now an awareness of I need to look for truth, and this is conversion, basically. So knowing the truth. So this is, you could say this is follows right along with missionary work. What Jeremiah is talking about here is as missionaries go out and teach, they'll realize, oh, here's where I learned truth, but here's where it wasn't true. Let's get rid of this and let's add more truth in, basically. And that'll help convert people. In fact, on the same thought, continuing on here, verse 20, shall a man make gods unto himself, and they are no gods? Therefore, behold, I will this once cause them to know, I will cause them to know mine hand and my might. They shall know that my name is the Lord. So they will understand who the real God is. You know, what's the point? If once you understand who the real God is, there's no point in making idols, because it's just contradictory to what you know. Now realize when in verse 21 when he says, I will cause them to know mine hand and my might, people are going to understand priesthood authority, priesthood power. Where is that coming from, basically? Who has the priesthood? The people will once again know who is the God of Israel, which is Jesus Christ, of course. They will know that my name is the Lord, is what he said. They're going to know it was me. I am the Lord they need to be worshiping. So there will come a moment of clarity because of missionary work to help people understand who God really is. That is what we're living today in our world right now, which is amazing. Jeremiah saw this way back. I mean, we're talking like when would this be? This would probably be like 593-ish, 597, 600 time frame, BC. So almost 2,600, 2,700 years ago. Jeremiah saw the great efforts and things we're doing today, which is really cool. So some really neat things. Now, this conversation is kind of coming to an end, and so we're going to jump into some more discussions here in the next chapter. So we'll see you there.